That's right, everyone. Good evening. It is me. We are back. This is it. And thank you for joining me for this special Facebook Live. It's a special Facebook Live side by side. And you know what? I want to introduce a very special guest of mine. His name is Mark Willis. I met Mark Willis. He's an insolvency practitioner. I met him at a full networking event. So Brad Burton and all the other guys, Martin Knapp, if you're watching this, shout out to for networking because you guys are absolutely amazing. Now, just a little bit of a history for you guys. We will be monitoring the comments, so please feel free to get involved, get active. Enjoy asking any questions that you want to ask. This is your time. There's a special benefit of being part of this group, which is growing every week. So thanks for being a part of this. The big thing I wanted to say is, for me, when I was first trained to be a mortgage advisor, I got my CMAP 1. Remember, I done this off my own back. I did not go into a school or a classroom. I actually self-taught in terms of studying the CMAP material. And when I got my CMAP 1, to get some practical experience, I actually done insolvency as a job. It was called Debt Doctor at the time. I'm not sure if they're still around, but this was my first experience into the world of debt and how it can be quite daunting, and let's face it, it's troubling, because you don't know what you want to do next or how to get out of some situations. But during that time, I met the experts. So this is one of the experts out there, and his name is Mark Willis from. The guy's name is your name is Mark Willis from Compass Financial Recovery and Insolvency.
Correct. Thank you.
So, Mark, please introduce yourself.
Well, as you said, I'm Mark. I'm from Compass Financial Recovery, and I've been doing insolvency for almost 30 years. It's a little bit like being at AA, as I understand it to be. I feel like I'm saying my name, and I'm an insolvency practitioner. But yeah, I've been doing it for 30 years. I fell into it purely by accident because my lodger was in insolvency and his firm had a position for a cashier. And because I was quite handy with numbers, I think probably from playing darts with my friend, I was quite good at adding up and subtracting. And I got the job, and I just really enjoyed insolvency. And being the kind of person I am, I just did my job, finished it, and didn't want to sit there twiddling my thumbs. So I was off there asking all the administrators and managers if there's anything I could do. And I got into it. 3 years later, passed my exams, and then kind of moved onwards and had a couple of years at the Institute of Chartered Accountants, where I was investigating complaints about insolvency practitioners. So when I left there, I knew exactly who I shouldn't work for and exactly who I should work for, and set up on my own in 2005. And here we are today, still working for my own business.
So tell me, what does an insolvency practitioner actually do?
Well, we do the formal side of insolvency. That's what we're licensed to do. So we can do bankruptcies, voluntary arrangements, liquidations, administrations. We also get involved in offering informal advice. So generally, if people would come and see me, first meeting, there's not any cost. I'm just trying to figure out what their problems are. And if I can help them, point them in the right direction, they go away, that's great. That's good PR for me because it means they don't have to go through any kind of process. So we do the formal process, and around the fringes, there are people who do debt management. So you get licensed debt counselors. So that tends to be where you go into somebody and they'll say, how much do you earn? They'll look at your income and expenditure and they say, right, okay, you can afford X a month. And then they write to all your creditors and say, you will accept this. And they just pay. You pay them, they take a fee, and what you're doing there, in my mind, is treading water, because I've known of somebody who was in one of those things for 8 years and he didn't pay it off.
Wow.
It just doesn't work. But the whole thing about what we do is it's very, very heavily regulated. But the whole idea is that you solve the problem and give people a means to move forwards, so that they can go on and make the success they want to. So for me, what drives it is taking that weight off of somebody's shoulders when they're sort of being burdened with debt, creditors, the revenue, and people like that, because people honestly do think directors, mainly men, I have to say, because we don't listen to anybody, we don't talk to our friends, we
Yeah.
just feel that we're obliged to do what we can. But generally, they throw in every penny they've got. They cause problems with their relationships, that their life savings go. They might cash in their pension. And actually, when they've done that, they've still got a business that's a basket case.
Mm.
So, as an insolvency practitioner, what we try and do as a profession, the vast majority of us, is to get people to look at things from a slightly different perspective
Mhm.
and to look after themselves primarily, because yeah, if you use the you get it quite often with with the aeroplane. They do all the safety briefing. Who is it who has to put the oxygen mask on first? It's the parent. You don't put it on the child, you put it on the parent, because the parent is the one that's got the expertise and knowledge to help everybody else.
Yeah.
So that's what directors don't do. The directors are the ones who should be putting the oxygen mask on themselves, but they don't. When they're in trouble, all they want to do is to help everybody else. And the person who suffers is them. So for me, I'd love to be able to change people's perception on things and get directors to actually think, I am an important person. My needs come first, because if I'm happy and I've got myself in order, then my business has got the best chance of survival and going on to greater things and success.
It's funny you say that because, oh, by the way, guys, if you're watching this and you want have any questions or you're liking this, please give us a like, give us a heart, or ask a question. We've got Mark here today. He's here to help you. If you see me looking down, it's because I'm monitoring any comments that are coming in. And guys like Vicky, who's on liking this at the moment, thanks for that, Vicky. And Alex, thanks for being part of this. So, guys, just feel free to ask a question. There's a lot of people that will require Mark's expertise and advice. And this is what we've got this group going for. So, feel free to ask anything. It's not just about mortgages. Moving on from that, so we looked in terms of the insolvency side, and you're looking for more the commercial directors. When I was doing it, it was more personal, so it was full and final settlements, IVA, bankruptcies, as well as credit arrangements.
Yeah.
And many things have obviously changed with regulations.
Yeah.
One of the big things that had changed when it came to bankruptcies was taking property into account. So as a property
Yeah.
being taken into account, and lenders are looking at that. Can you explain, just what the process is of bankruptcies? Because, from my point of view, I'm definitely outdated. When I was doing debt doctor, it was 2015,
Right.
2005. So this is going to be interesting.
Right. Well,
What is the process?
yeah. Well, I mean, if you go back years and years ago, the process was you went bankrupt and then you stayed bankrupt until you'd repaid all your debts. Then the 1986 Act came out, and after that, you would be bankrupt for 3 years. And during that period of time, you'd pay whatever they felt was the right amount for you to pay, taking into account your income and expenditure. So you'd have an income payments order if you didn't agree with them, because they go to court and get an order, or otherwise they brought in income payment agreements where you would say, yeah, I agree with that. I'll pay X pounds a month for 3 years. What's happened since in the Enterprise Act in 2003 is that the period that you're bankrupt for is only a year. So you get your discharge after a year, unless they can show that you've been a very naughty bankrupt. So, if you've gone out and you've gambled all your money away, or you've done terrible things, if you're a sole trader who runs a double glazing company and you've taken lots of deposits, knowing that you're never going to fulfill the order, or just done something which really doesn't pass the smell test, and it's quite and they feel that you're a threat to the public, they will not give you a discharge from bankruptcy. But the point being, you still have to pay for the 3 years. But in bankruptcy, you pay what they think you can afford, and they are quite reasonable about that. They do have certain they have guidance which says you can spend this much on food per person. You can so there's certain things they work within. Whereas in a voluntary arrangement, it's normally the other way around. The creditors say, well, we want this much money, we're not going to allow you this, we're not going to allow you that. And you tend to pay more money in an IVA per month than you would in a bankruptcy, because the bankruptcy is run by the official receiver, who determines what's fair and reasonable for you to pay to satisfy your domestic needs. Now, one of the things, when I was working at a firm previously, going back about probably, I hate to say it, almost 20 years, they were looking at setting up one of these IVA factories. And one of the things that really disturbed me about that was that people were being encouraged by the people who are on the fringes of our industry, the debt counsellors and those people who don't have the same regulation. They're not licensed insolvency practitioners, so they would be the ones doing those payment arrangements and stuff like that. And they might be sort of encouraging people to say, oh, you don't really want to go bankrupt. There's a lot of stigma involved. And even today, with the way things have gone, there's still this idea that there is a stigma with bankruptcy. I don't see it. I don't see there's any stigma at all.
Yeah, like what you said, the stigma was the big thing to get over, to clearly take someone into bankruptcy. You talked about regulations. Who are you guys regulated by? Is it the Office of Fair Trade still?
No, it's if you're an insolvency practitioner, you can get your license from the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales, the ACCA, the Law Society, the Institute of Chartered Accountants in Scotland, and the DTI, or what that's now become, whatever the latest incarnation is, I think it is. They will give you a license. There's been talk over many years of consolidating it into one super regulator, but it's, for me, I'm licensed by the ICAEW, so that involves me having to do an annual return, give them lots of information, and every 3 years they come round and do reviews of my files and my systems to make sure that I'm complying with what needs to be.
And again, if you're in a regulated environment like financial services, accountancy, law, you have to keep your data up to date. There's no denying it, and the records need to be secure as well. We're governed by the ICO in that sense. We're looking at, from the insolvency side, we've looked at the personal side a little bit in depth, and when someone should go bankrupt. What is the actual process of it?
Right. Well, if you go bankrupt, there's two ways of going bankrupt. One is your creditors serve a statutory demand on you. You don't pay the money, and they then go to court and apply for a petition to make you bankrupt. Right. Typically, that's what the Inland Revenue do if you haven't paid them. And then it goes to court, and the court will make the order. If you owe the money, the court are quite likely to make the order. So that's a creditor's petition. In the old days, well, not that old days, but it used to be that you could go and present a debtor's petition. So you go down to your local county court, you'd fill out the forms, you'd see the judge in chambers, tell him about your problems. He might ask you a few questions, and then they would make you bankrupt. But now you can actually go bankrupt online. You can fill all the documents in online, and they will sort you out that way. The best place to look is www.insolvency.gov.uk. Fantastic resource. There's lots of practices that dress up all this kind of information, but actually go to insolvency.gov.uk, because it's just a brilliant resource, and that will set out all about bankruptcy. So the process is that a petition is presented, or you apply online, and then the bankruptcy order is made. And once you've been made bankrupt, the official receiver will deal with your case, unless you've got you're a high net worth individual, perhaps, or was a high net worth individual, so you've got assets, or if there's some public interest reason why there needs to be a big investigation. So, for example, years ago, I think it was Jonathan Aitken went bankrupt, and his bankruptcy was done by Louise Britton of Baker Tilly. So you get high profile people, Katie Price and people like that.
The most recent, who's gone bankrupt.
Exactly. So, but the trustee in bankruptcy, their job is a very simple and straightforward one. They realise your assets, and then they pay your creditors from any surplus. And your assets, unlike what it was shown on EastEnders when somebody on EastEnders went bankrupt years ago. They don't come round and empty your house of bedding and clothing and TVs.
Yeah,
And
that was kind of weird.
yeah, I mean, you're entitled to keep things that you need, the tools of your trade, and stuff to satisfy your basic domestic needs. So there's obviously a bit of a question mark as to whether or not a 70 quid Sky subscription is needed for your basic domestic needs, but they're not going to come around and take a basic TV. They might do if you've got an 82-inch, £5,000 TV, but if you just got a normal TV, they're not going to come and take your TV. They're not going to come and take your clothing. And with your jewellery, they're not going to take your wedding ring. But if you've got something that's big and crusty, then obviously they will, because it's items of excess value they're interested in. Your matrimonial home is probably the most important one. And that's quite an interesting topic on its own, probably for a whole one of these on its own, because if you are in business and you have a partner, I think spouse, or I don't know what, whatever the technical term is these days, I'm not going to use the M word. But the long and short of it is, if you structure...
Why do I feel that there's a big story behind that?
Well, I do suffer from the M word because I am married.
No one's accused Mark of not being light-hearted when it comes to these kinds of subjects.
Yeah,
but
no.
Sorry, I was going to say, we've actually had a question from Vicky. Vicky, thanks for asking the question. What harms your credit more, bankruptcy or IVAs?
They both harm it exactly the same. It will stay on your credit record, and if you are in an IVA, you're in an IVA generally for 5 years. So, and it's not until the 5 years you get your release. In a bankruptcy, you're discharged after a year. So if you wanted to go back into taking on credit and risk, because a lot of people in bankruptcy, it's credit card abuse that gets them there. But if you go into bankruptcy now and you've become bankrupt through, you're just a normal person who's had a bit of bad luck or something, you'll get your automatic discharge after 1 year, and then you can go out and your credit rating will start building from 1 year. So after the 5 years that you've been in an IVA, although your credit still won't be clean, you'll have built up a bit of credit history. So after the 5 years, in theory, I would think you're in a slightly better position having gone through bankruptcy, providing you've not done anything heinous and you don't get a bankruptcy restriction order.
Yeah, and also in terms of bankruptcy versus IVAs, from personal experience, when I was doing it, with the bankruptcy side of things, yes, it's true. Once you're discharged, from a mortgage lender point of view, some lenders will keep you at that sort of, we can't touch you for 3 years. Some lenders will be after 1 year, and other lenders, you can never go to them. That's basically from the bankruptcy side of things. IVAs are far worse, just because, like what Mark was saying, you're stuck in that for a time period. And again, because it's automatically adjusting each and every year after a regular review, that can actually impede any chance of you rebuilding yourself. So if we've done it in comparison, by year 3 of an IVA versus year 3 of a bankruptcy, you can literally go get credit with being discharged bankrupt. Whereas with IVAs, you're not going to be able to do that. You're paying off the debt still. There was actually rumor originally. Vicky, I hope I've answered that one, and I hope Mark's answered that one for you as well.
There's one thing I wanted to say on top of that, because if you're in an IVA, what a lot of people aren't told is all the time up to the end of year 5, in theory, you can still be made bankrupt for the debts, because if you're paying, say, £250 a month and it's upward only reviews every year, if after year 4 your circumstances change and you don't have £250, then in theory, depending on how the modifications to your IVA have been worded, the trustee in bankruptcy must make you bankrupt. Sorry, your supervisor must petition for your bankruptcy, or you have to go back and seek a variation to the IVA. And if it's a case that you go back after year 4 and say, look, I've lost my job or I'm on a lower paid income. I've now got kids and a family and all that, and I can't make the payments. The only real option when you vary the IVA is to extend it even further. So you could end up having a 5-year IVA. After year 4, you hit a brick wall and you say, look, I can't afford it. I'm going to have to halve my payments. And creditors might say, well, okay, you can extend it to 6 years, which to me is terrible.
No, you're stuck in debt forever and a day.
I mean, I'm not a great fan of IVAs.
No,
There are
neither was I. I will admit I wasn't a fan of IVAs either, but they do serve a purpose. And again, for a lot of personal, again, it's down to the advice and recommendation based upon everything being taken into account, and that's why you need to have the experts dealing with this. You can't have someone who, which was the case many years ago, guys just propping up and saying, hey, we can take care of your debt and just keep you in a debt management plan forever and a day. Vicky, thank you for that. She said that we've answered the question very well, more in particular you. So yeah, thanks for that, Vicky. Okay, so we've looked at bankruptcies. We are now looking at IVAs. So, there was something called a full and final settlement and full and final IVAs that I was dealing with too, where it's per pound that you owe. So to the pound, you'd pay maybe 40%, 40p in the pound as a one-off hit. Are they still around as full and final settlements?
Well, I think they are. But the great thing about an IVA, even though what I don't like are these what they call the consumer credit IVAs.
Yeah.
Because that is just somebody who's gone out, run up the credit cards, and then pays off the money over a period of years when actually they should go bankrupt. Most consumer credit IVAs, in my own personal opinion, the people are better off going bankrupt because that way the debt's just gone. There's no more pressure. But full and final settlement ones tend to be a little bit different. I've done them for solicitors and professionals where perhaps they've had issues over some personal guarantees they might give, but they have friends or family who have money, and those friends or family say, look, if they go bankrupt, they can't trade, they can't do what they're going to do, so you're not going to get any money if they go bankrupt because they will lose their job. And they don't want to be stuck in an IVA for 5 years making all the payments because, where's the incentive as a professional? And so it may well be that you'd say, well, look, typically, let's say somebody's going to earn or have £400 a month available over a period of 60 months. So that's going to give you £24,000 over that period of time. It may well be that
something you just went really wrong here. Don't worry, it's okay. Again, technical issues, guys. Don't worry.
Yeah, so they'll say we'll put in £20,000 now in full and final settlement, so you don't have to worry about them making the monthly payment. You don't have to wait 5 years for your money. We're not going to give you all of that 24,000 now, but we'll give you a lesser sum right now in full and final settlement. So you get a lump sum, normally from a third party, which means that you get your money now. So the creditors will get less, but they'll get certainty. The debtor will be in a position where they don't have that pressure of knowing that every month for the next 5 years they've got to pay their salary or a proportion of their salary over. And also, if somebody is in a profession or in a job where they've got themselves into debt, the chances of them having a really smooth ride over 5 years, there's a good chance they're going to have problems. Because if the nature of their business is that it's a little bit lumpy, then what's to say that things won't change in an IVA? And of course, in an IVA, the pressure from the creditors and these institutions that represent the credit cards and the finance companies, the pressure there is they squeeze every last bit of money out of you. So you're running on empty for 5 years, in effect.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I if I'm going to do an IVA, where possible, a lump sum IVA is by far the best thing. It's in, it's done, it's finished.
And that's from my point of view, one of the big things I would honestly look at from a remortgage side of things. You're doing a remortgage, and you've got the ability to get that lender because by that point your credit is shot to bits. There's no denying it. So it's finding the lender. They can help. There are lenders out there who are dealing with this particular kind of market. So have no fear. It's working hand in hand with the mortgage advisor and the insolvency practitioner to be able to find the right solution for you. Can people come direct to an insolvency practitioner?
Yeah, people can. I mean, there's lots of adverts out there. What you'll probably find, you'll see people advertising in the London Standard. You'll see some of these big IVA factories advertising online. They spend about £1 million a year on advertising. So it will come up with all these, it'll sort of suck you into the IVA way of thinking. But yeah, you can come, if people come to me, they've been recommended by a friend of theirs who I might have dealt with, or a firm of accountants that I've done other work for or helped other clients. But one of the things about the IVA that is really relevant for mortgage broking in particular is the structure of the lend from the point of view of things aren't always 50-50. If we go back to bankruptcy, they look at it and they start off on the basis of 50-50 unless you can show otherwise. So they'll take into account who put the deposit in, who's been paying for, like if you have an extension, if that's paid for by the non-bankrupt spouse, then they get credit for that in the equity that's generated in the property. So in IVAs, quite often, I had a couple who came to me, and it was heartbreaking because they came to me too late. They'd sold their house, or they'd remortgaged and used the funds raised to pay off some of the husband's debt. And they'd used the wife's equity. They then sold the property and used all of the funds to pay off more of the husband's debt, but didn't pay it all off. Moved in with mother-in-law, and then he got made bankrupt. Now, had he at the outset come to me, the first thing I would have done would have been to refer him to a mortgage broker or ask him who his mortgage broker was, so that they could look at raising as much money as they can, and then the spouse saying, right, we're going to offer an IVA, we're going to remortgage the property. If he goes bankrupt, you will only get his share, and the house, because we've got a year in the house in bankruptcy because we've got kids, you won't get your money until after a year, and then there may well be court costs to get us out, etc., etc. So what you're going to get back is only going to be part of his share, less all the costs of bankruptcy, and his share will be less because the property will be sold in bankruptcy. So if at that time you say, right, well, instead we're going to remortgage, and the spouse is going to put in their share in full and final settlement, the creditors have a choice. They get a house that's remortgaged at the proper value, they get the money now, and they get part of the spouse's share. And because the spouse is settling somebody else's debts, it's an old legal term called the doctrine of estoppel. So you're not paying the debt off early, but because a third party is paying it off and you're not entitled to get that money, they can offer a lesser sum in full and final settlement, and you can accept it. And once it's accepted, job done. They can't chase the debtor for the money after that.
Now that is fascinating. If you guys who are watching this now are in a regulated environment where you've got to do CPD, continual professional development, use this as your CPD. Add it to your CPD training hours, or the structured training hour, because let's face it, that is worth its weight in gold. Whether you're a mortgage advisor or a financial advisor, or just someone who's training to become that. One of the biggest things about bankruptcy or any kind of financial difficulties is properties being taken into repossession. Now, you've just literally shown a way how to stop that from happening if there is a couple involved and the debt is on one of the partners. That in itself is more than this interview happening. Guys, if you're watching this on the replay, and anyone who's going through these kinds of troubled times, because these are troubling times. We haven't come out of lockdown yet. And we're seeing far more people going into financial difficulty. taking payment holidays and that kind of stuff with their creditors, use these videos. They're here to help you. And Mark, that is, I've learned something new. That's for sure.
Oh, good.
And I thought I knew a lot, but obviously I don't. So,
isn't it? We all do our own jobs, and we kind of think, oh, that's simple and straightforward. It isn't. The idea of a mortgage and who is entitled to what share of what. Whenever most people go for a mortgage, they'll say, right, how are you holding this 50-50? You're doing it as tenants in common or joint tenants, because there's all different ramifications. Well, actually, sometimes declarations of trust can be really helpful. In this day and age, we like to call ourselves Entrepreneur Britain. I actually prefer to call us Buy Now, Pay Later Britain, because people buy everything's rented, nothing's ever owned. But if you are setting up a business and you are in a risky environment, from the point of view of you don't know how the business is going to go, then just let me move. The sun's beginning to shine, and I'm a bit concerned that I will blind people as it bounces off my shiny head. Right.
Yeah, shiny head, that's for sure. Yeah.
Right. Here we go. That's a bit better. Right. Yeah. Okay.
Hence why I tend to do indoors for me. I tried to do it outdoors once, and it started raining.
Well, we've got building work going on. I've got 3 teenage kids, so and there's football on as well, and so there we go. Now, so where was I before I moved?
We were talking about basically in terms of I think properties,
declarations of trust. Yeah. Now, quite often, people who move into a house will get money lent by parents.
Yeah.
And parents just think, oh yeah, there you go. There's 100 grand, and I'll move in with you, and I'll have a granny annex. I had one exactly like this, where a lady ran a florist, and her mum had just given her 100 grand, which she'd used to pay off some of the mortgage. Moved in with her. Did she sign a declaration of trust so that she got a share of the equity worth the 100 grand? No, she didn't. So when the lady went bankrupt, because the house was in her name, the whole of the interest went to the trustee. And to actually try and do an IVA was really difficult, because there was no way of actually saying, well, she might have repaid the mortgage by 100,000, but actually that was a gift from her mother. What the mother should have done was to gift it, or put it in and take an interest in the property.
Yeah, chargeable interest.
And she had financial problems at the time. So if you've got financial problems, I say this to business owners: if you're going to put money into your business, don't just throw money into your business. Excuse me. Either secure it against, or preferably buy assets. So if you've got a company car that's worth 10 grand, and you put 10 grand in the business, invoice yourself for the car, buy the car, and that way, if you're having to put 10 grand in because the company's got cash flow problems, if those cash flow problems get worse and the company goes into liquidation, you own that car because you bought that car with the 10 grand you put in. If you just put 10 grand in, and then a few days or a few weeks before insolvency, you say, well, look, I'm taking that car. I've put in the 10 grand, it's going to settle it. You haven't got a hope in hell, because that is a preference. You're preferring yourself. So if you put money into a situation where you've got debt, make sure you get some value for it. If your parents lend you money and put it into your business, if you're a sole trader or if you're in a limited company, please make sure that they take some security, or you sell them some assets which they can then leave with you for you to use for free.
This is amazing, because again, within our group, we got guys who are tradespeople. I think James Kenner is a plasterer. So ultimately, guys like that are going to be buying their equipment. So their trowel, their plaster, all of that kind of stuff. And again, they may not invoice it through the business. They may be doing it from their personal.
Yeah.
So, I'm not saying James is doing it. I'm just saying, just as, from what you're saying, that for
Yeah.
me is a big thing. Because there's a lot of people who are not financially educated
No.
in this manner. They are educated in the sense of 2 + 2 = 4. That's
Yeah.
all I need to do. That's all I need to make. But knowing these little tidbits, worthwhile.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
mean, from the point of view of assets, it tends to be larger assets. So
Mm.
if you've got a plasterer, the only way a plasterer will go bust now is if they can't get hold of plaster. So there's probably a big risk, because I'm just trying to get some plastering done, and we can't get any.
James, if you're watching this, and I hope you do watch this, I know that you've got a lot of plaster. Get in contact with this guy.
Yeah. So, but if he's got a van, let's say, for example, I don't know, he has a bad job and a bad debt, and
Yeah.
somebody doesn't pay him because they're awkward people.
Oh yeah.
If he has to put 10 grand into the business or borrow 10 grand off his mum and dad, then just for now, sell the van to them, because they then own the van. Because if his business doesn't improve, or he has another bad debt and he ends up going bankrupt, a van's probably a bad idea, because a van is a tool of your trade, so you'd be able to
Yeah.
keep it. But I don't know, if you had some whizzy piece of equipment that made your job a lot easier, that's worth about 10 grand. I did a printing job recently where they put money into the company, and they've got printing presses that are worth sort of 40, 50 grand.
Yeah. Easily.
If they put 50 grand into the business, buy the printing press, because if you carry on having problems and then you go into liquidation, or if you go bankrupt because you're a sole trader, if a family friend has bought that equipment, or you've bought it, if you're a company director, nobody can get near it, because you can say, I put the money in, and at the time I put it in, I took that asset out. It's
It's
there are
amazing.
so many people who could make their lives a lot better like that, but it's when family and friends put money in, that's the thing that's really sad, because family and friends, you want to repay them, and you will repay them in the future from whatever you do after, but actually you could make their position so much better.
And that is, again, little nuggets of gold information here.
Yeah.
Even accountants, I know certain accountants, they will deal with a certain kind of client, but they may not even know these kinds of things. Hence why they'll refer it across to an insolvency practitioner when
Yeah.
things go really bad. Because they just want to have the nice, easy life. And that is absolutely fine. You're allowed to do that. But let's take it one step at a time, and let's be honest and realistic. If that's not your expertise, then you need to give it to someone who is the expert in that field. We do it as mortgage advisors all the time. We have master brokers that have access to lenders that we won't have access to necessarily, because we are not going to be on that panel
Yeah.
for those particular lenders,
Yeah.
and they don't want that rush of clients to them or inquiries. They would just want to deal with a set number of brokers, and that's fine. But we've got access to those kinds of people, and again, having this will give a added value service to
Yeah.
your industry, because let's face it, you're going to be able to offer your clients something more. But again, that's me saying that. It's totally down to whoever is watching this right now. If you're watching this on the replay, absolutely get in contact with Mark. How Mark is part of the group. Even leave a question in the group for Mark. He will answer it for you, because he's an active member. Hence why I'm introducing people into this group and doing these side by sides. I've had another question, which was in terms of property and pensions.
Yeah.
Okay, pensions is a big one. Property is a big one. We touched on it briefly because we looked at EastEnders in terms of, your residential property. Can they take bedding and stuff like that? Now, no, you can't. You have to be able to live habitably.
Yeah.
But if a property is seized in bankruptcy, because a lot of lenders will look at this, was a property seized in bankruptcy? It's the same with pensions. Can they be seized in bankruptcy?
Right. The thing about pensions is whether or not you have been making ridiculously large pension contributions. So you've got to show a form of dishonesty.
Okay.
So let's say you are just paying the normal. Well, I was going to say that the normal 15% or so, because I know that if you're going to get a pension, that's about the level you need to do to carry on with the salary you've got. I think years and years ago, I paid into one of those final salary schemes, and I was 10.45, and the employer was making up the difference. So, to have so in the context of, I can't remember what the technical word they use is. It's not unconscionable, but it's something similar. So if you were paying yourself a salary of 5,000 a month and making pension contributions, or paying into a fund very large, similar large amounts, then you've got a problem. I know things have changed because they've reduced all the levels as to what you can put in with lifetime allowances and things. So, separate to the lifetime allowance issues, the only way they can really get at a pension would be to show that you've been making really vastly disproportionate contributions compared to what you should be in your circumstances. But normally the way it works is, once you've drawn down your pension, they're entitled to take that as part of your income. So, and if you decide to draw down and take a lump sum, they can have part of your lump sum. So the reality is they can't force you to do anything. But once you've drawn it down and decided to start taking your pension, that can form part of your estate. So let's say, I know you're far too young to retire, but if you were able to convince the people that you were past the age of retirement and able to draw down a lump sum, if you drew down 100,000 quid, and after a couple of years later you go bankrupt, there won't be any issue with them saying, we want that 100,000 quid, because you're entitled to draw it down and spend it. But you wouldn't, once you go bankrupt, make any decision to draw down a lump sum. The only way you might do it would be if you're going to do an IVA. So you can, if you had a lump sum of £100,000, for example, and you had other things, you just didn't want to go bankrupt, you could say, right, well, okay, if I go bankrupt, you can't touch my pension. But if you agree to an IVA, I will draw it down and give you X pounds, which you wouldn't be entitled to. So it can be used as a personal choice by somebody, but you can't be forced at this stage. But, things do change as time goes by.
Of course, and that's where your expertise and, hence why I'm saying continuing professional development needs to be a big thing. It needs to, you need to stay on top of stuff. And again, it's fascinating knowing all these kinds of things which are happening in the industry at the moment. We looked at limited companies, we've looked at IVAs, we've looked at bankruptcies, we've looked at personal. So now, from your sort of perspective, as people are gradually coming out of lockdown, what do you think is going to happen with personal insolvencies? Do you think they're going to go down? Do you think they're going to go up?
It's quite a difficult one, because my view on lockdown is that if people actually took the time to think about their spending, they might actually quite scare themselves. I was talking to you earlier about a young lad who many years ago came to see me. He was in a debt management plan, and he came to me because he said, I just can't keep up the payments. And a debt management plan, the payments are generally pretty affordable compared to an IVA. So we sat down, we looked at his expenditure, and by the time we finished, he was sitting there sort of wide-eyed, oh my God, because he did not realize the amount of money he was spending on energy drinks, chocolate bars, bags of crisps, sandwiches, and just incidental spending during the day. And when we added it up, he was spending about £120 a month that he really hadn't taken account of when he did his income and expenditure accounts for the debt management plan. And that's why he couldn't afford it. So I think the interesting thing with furlough is that people are getting 80% of their salary, but where they're not going to work and going out and getting a coffee and buying lunch, or having the travel cost, or maybe going for a few beers after work with their friends, or glasses of wine, whichever their preference might be, or in squash, whatever everybody's preference is. The fact is, they're spending less. My brother-in-law and sister-in-law, they haven't got kids. they've got a really nice life. They've got friends. They go to the cinema. They go out. They eat out a lot. They have takeaways, and they cannot believe what a difference lockdown has made to their expenditure.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
that's the sort of thing. So the other side of the ticket will be where people simply don't have income. So at the lower end of the scale, where perhaps they're not on furlough, or where they've been made redundant, where the business has shut down, or they've got kids at home, people might be running up credit cards.
Yeah, and that was the other part I was going to come on to you with, especially with universal credit. And
Yeah,
let's face it, it has got its issues, which it's had many years to iron out and still hasn't ironed out yet. And I think a lot of people are quite scared of going on universal credit. No one wants to be made redundant. No one wants to be on furlough. Everyone wants to be working,
yeah,
and they want to be feeling that they're contributing. But it's just unfortunate with the way how things are that can't be the case. So this is why this is quite important, and you're right. People do, again, within mortgage advising, financial planning, people do have to look at affordability, but it isn't on the same level as what you've got to do, because
yeah,
it's every single penny. For us, it's a very simple: how much is your income in? How much is the outgoings? What are you roughly spending it on? That's fine. We can do it that way, because we won't be looking at it in depth. We just want to make sure there's
yeah.
enough left over for relevant investment or relevant, monthly payments towards the mortgage. And life insurance and all the other bits and pieces, hence a fully protected mortgage. But this is, the benefits of knowing this. Ideally, no one wants to be going through these kinds of things, and no one wants to see an insolvency practitioner. But let's face it, life is life, and this is why people are not aware of insolvency practitioners. They don't know how to get in contact with them, or what they actually do. It is a myth to many people. We talked about official receivers, and insolvency practitioners. In one nice way of putting it, we're like, you guys are like polar bears, all cute and cuddly, until you get really close,
Yeah.
because all bets are then off. But that's not the case. In many aspects, it is a matter of genuinely trying to help someone. There will be the one or two rogues out there, but everyone wants to be helped, and you are in that position to help people who are in the worst type of position.
Well, I think saying polar bears is quite polite, because we often get people saying vultures and vampires and things like that. The fact is, with all professions, there are people out there who are just in it for the money.
Yeah.
There are people out there who are in it to try and bring a bit of, well, I wouldn't say I'll bring joy and happiness, but I try and take away, for me, the pleasure is seeing the weight lift from somebody's shoulders. And I had somebody the other day who wrote back to me and said, Mark, it was exactly true. I got the best night's sleep I've had for months, because you explained it very clearly, and I actually understood what my real obligations are, rather than what I had up here. Because most people up here think the situation is far worse.
Yeah.
It is. And yes, it is bad. But it doesn't have to be. You don't need to keep beating yourself up. The whole idea of the way that the changes have come in the Enterprise Act and the way that things are moving is about rehabilitation. It's about the fact that people shouldn't be punished and kept under constant stress because they've got debt. And if you take credit cards as an example, I've thought for a very long time that the credit card companies are actually culpable for their own problems. Because do you remember when there was all these balance-free transfers?
Oh yeah, yeah.
They give you the card, you pay a little fee, and then you get this balance-free transfer. So people transfer their balance, but they didn't insist that the other card was cut up and the account closed. People would then run that card up again, get another balance-free transfer, and before they know it, it's like Tommy Cooper with those cups and the bottles of wine. It's like you go from having one credit card to having about 10, and you can't afford them. So you're running up, you're using one credit card to repay all the others.
It was called cross-firing.
Yeah.
You're literally firing across to different credit cards. And that kept people in perpetual debts because they didn't learn. We looked at, the figures are there. The stats are there. If you make the minimum payment on credit cards, then you're going to stay in debt for a lot longer because of the compound interest factor.
Yeah.
But again, you got to look at debt in two ways. You got to look at it in terms of how quick can you get rid of it, and how do you use it properly. So a proper way of using debt would be a mortgage, because
Yeah.
you're using it to secure something over a longer period of time, where it would take a long time to actually save up for a house. You may not even be able to save up for a house. You need a mortgage, because let's face it, the access to that kind of wealth is very few and far between. It's very concentrated, and not many people can ever get to that sort of level.
Yeah.
You then got other kinds of debt which is out there, like company loan debt, director loan debt, just to make sure that it's building up the business. But
Yeah.
it's affordable because it's cash flow. It's doing it in the right direction because you know that your business is going to be able to help. The final kind of debt would be maybe credit card debt.
Yeah.
The problem with credit card debt is that it can go into the consumer element. And what you need to do is be disciplined. Have your budget. And if you need to, talk to the credit card company to set that budget and maintain it. You do not overspend on that credit card.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think the sorry.
Sorry, I was going to say, so people who do, as an example, marketing, and they set marketing budgets, they were doing it from a credit card because, Facebook, Instagram, these kinds of places will use credit cards. They won't use debit cards as client accounts, or they'll use PayPal. So it's far more easier to control and convert the currency into dollars as opposed to doing it in pounds. There's a lot of good things with debt, but you've got to be disciplined. You've got to know how to control it. Otherwise, it can go out of control and it can destroy your life.
Well, I think part of the issue is the emotional element of spending,
Yes.
and
Oh,
I've read it by Alvin Hall. Alvin Hall, the American guy, his books are fantastic because they deal with exactly that. Because it's the buzz that people get from spending. I know people who you think, how the hell do they afford what they've got? But secretly, they're borrowing money off their parents. They're
yeah,
running out of credit cards.
yeah.
I know who just took out they've just taken out a brand new car PCP. They're paying £300 a month. I'm sorry, I don't even pay £300 a month. I tend to buy a car of a certain age and then work out how much it's going to cost me over 2 years, and I think, right, in 2 years I'll get a different car, because I'm lucky. Cars aren't important to me. I haven't got the body to pose in an Aston Martin or a Ferrari, so I
do. But yeah, I mean, again, we're looking at luxury items, and yes, if you can afford a luxury item, great. But it's better to have an asset that can pay off. So, like, Rich Dad Poor Dad, best example, Robert Kiyosaki's book. And what you were saying earlier in terms of assets, buying the company, if you're going to put money into the company, you buy the assets within the company.
Yeah.
And then take it, literally have the ownership outside of the company. The same thing happens here within, wealth building. You buy an asset, which is going to generate income. Once the debt is paid off for it, well, it's still generating income, so it's learning the tools of the trade, and it's learning about these kinds of things. And there's so many wonderful things out there. Really, well and truly, it's because of our education. And like what you said, there's an emotional attachment to owning luxury goods.
Yeah.
There is no real life method of getting those luxury goods unless you go out and learn about these kinds of things.
Yeah.
And this is an important topic. And again, like I was saying, people like you don't really want to be doing these kinds of things because you'd rather sort out a solution to keep people from going into bankruptcy.
Yeah.
You want people to have a good night's sleep, but it's because they've gotten themselves so far into a bad situation because they weren't having regular reviews with their accountants, they weren't having regular checks, they weren't having an accountability factor, and they were looking at the bright, sparkly things rather than wondering how are they going to pay for it with something else. They decide to pay for it from their own pocket. So then guys like you come along, which you serve your purpose.
Yeah, I dealt with a liquidation recently where the business was a marketing business. The guy who was running it, he was running it with his girlfriend, and she was, how should we put it? She liked sparkly things. So they had this order which they'd been told was coming through. Before it came through, they went out and took out leases for two big cars, a Volkswagen Touareg, which was about £700 a month, and I think a Golf that was around about 350 a month. And the deal didn't happen. So they were stuck with those cars on leases without this wonderful 6-figure contract. And
Why?
exactly, they wanted it, or she wanted it, before it actually came in. But she thought, rather than doing that belts and braces, let's get it in, let's get it running, let's see the money coming in. It was, I want it now, and that's what can happen. I had another guy who was he was an accountant, and him and his wife, it was he was a very good accountant and made a lot of money, but he was also an insolvency practitioner. When he first set up in business, him and his wife bought a very nice house, and it was in her name right from the outset for the last 25 years. You know, it was one of those love stories. He knew that she was the woman for him, and vice versa. It wasn't as transient as things tend to be in this day and age. And when he got into trouble in his business with a property crash in the 90s, to an IBA, that house, which was worth a 7-figure sum, didn't come to him. It was his wife's house. It didn't form part of his estate. And that was because he planned what he'd done years and years and years ago. But in this day and age, how many people have that kind of relationship with anybody?
Very few. And again, relationship breakdowns and all the rest of that kind of stuff, they do happen. Right, Mark, we're coming up close to the hour. We've had questions in that have been answered, and thankfully, you know, some of the questions that were asked were well before our Facebook Live. So thank you for joining me. How can people get in contact with you, Mark? What is your
If they want to go onto the website, www.compassfry.com, or they can email me at guide@compassfry.com. Otherwise, if they just want to let you know they'd like to contact me, you can give my details to them directly, or
you can also put the link in every Monday. Every Monday, your link to your business in the group.
Right. Okay. You know, technologically that advanced, so I might need a bit of a hint from you.
But yes, and again, you know, guys, feel free, ask Mark these questions, any questions that you want. If you're watching this on the replay, which I know there's going to be a lot of people watching this on the replay, you know, thanks for being a part of this, because again, let's face it, not everyone can stick around for a whole hour, and I appreciate that. I'm not looking at everyone sticking around for an hour, but this is a resource for you guys. So tomorrow, funny enough, we're on my Facebook Live. I'm going to be talking about credit. I'm going to be talking about the credit reference agencies out there, how the different agencies report, how to take advantage of it, and more importantly, you know, you've got an extra benefit of being a part of this group. You have a 30-day free trial with all the major credit reference agencies under Check My File. Check My File, and the link I've actually put in. Sign up for it, guys. It's 30 days free of charge and £15 per month. Absolutely wonderful, and it's all the credit reference agencies. But in the meantime, tomorrow I will be talking about that. So feel free, join me. If you've got any questions for me, please ask it. And again, Mark, thank you so much for doing this today. And I know it's such a wonderful day out there. So I'm going to leave everyone to get a drink, and you know, thank God the pubs are open again, huh?
Yeah, indeed. Thanks, Eddie. See you soon.
See you soon. Take care. Bye. Bye. Thank you so much, Mark.